Okay, good?
Yep.
Alright, so this test is worth 80 points. There's 2 essay questions, and then there's a section from number 31 to number 63. Okay? There's 2 of them. One of the sections gives you different categories of disorders, and you have to identify whether it's an anxiety disorder, a somatoform disorder, a dissociative disorder, or I should say, I always mispronounce that, dissociative disorder, mood disorder, schizophrenia, personality disorders, or all the above. So you get a statement and you have to identify if it's a somatoform disorder, right? So it's basically each section of the chapter on disorders, you have to figure out which statement matches, okay? So if it's like something, if it's a symptom, you have to match which symptom is most associated with that disorder, okay? So for example, memory loss. Memory loss is associated most closely with which of those types? Dissociative disorders, right? Because you've got amnesia, fugue, and multiple personality, or a dissociative identity disorder. All of those, you lose something with your memory, right? If I were to say, like PTSD, right? Hey, how's it going?
Good. I wanted to see how many crazy people showed up for this review.
Well, only 3. When we do it at like Caribou or Starbucks or something, we get, what, 15, 20?
Yeah.
Probably.
You're recording this, and I'm.
So then, oh, that's fine. That's fine. Mr. Holder stopped in to say hi. If you're wondering who that, what that voice is. So yeah, we do this before every unit test, and then I always record it and upload it to YouTube afterwards, so then people can watch it if they can't make it. So it's not extra credit or anything, but then they can just ask questions if they don't understand something.
Well, I heard through the door you were listing a bunch of disorders. I'm pretty sure I have all those.
Right. Yeah. If you don't, a few more years of you being a principal, and you might develop a few.
I agree. I agree. Good to see you guys.
Yep. Thanks for stopping in. Okay. So, like I was saying, there's that identification section where you have anxiety disorders. In the words of Marissa, somatoform disorders. So, somatoform disorders. I shouldn't make fun of her because I mispronounce. I have, like, everybody has, like, a word that they struggle with all the time, right? So, dissociative disorders, mood disorders, schizophrenia, personality disorders are all of the above. So there might be 3 that are anxiety and 1 that's mood disorder. There might be equal number of each, you don't know, okay?
Chapter 16?
Yep, 16. Then there's a section on therapy. That's from number 45 to 63, okay?
What does that 45 to 63 mean?
Those are the question numbers.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Right? So I'm just giving you the numbers so you get an idea of how many questions are like that, right? So, how many questions is that? Like 18, right? So in that section, like I said in class, it's going to be psychoanalytical perspective, humanistic, cognitive, behavioral, biological, or all of the above. So you would see a statement, and then you have to identify which of the theories, those are basically the contemporary approaches, right? Which of those theories does that type of therapy match the most, okay? Then from number 1 to number 30 are multiple choice in a group of 5, okay? So in terms of structure, was it clear what the test will be like? You guys understand?
Basically the disorders and then therapies.
Yep, so 30 questions, multiple choice, that's a little bit of everything.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? About 15 on disorders. You have to identify if it matches anxiety's somatoform, right? Dissociative, mood disorders, schizophrenia, personality, or all of the above. Then there's like 18 where it's the 5 perspectives on contemporary psychology applied to therapy. And then you have to, there's also an all of the above, right? Okay? So, the essay questions, there's 2 of them. One has to do with one of the discussion questions from the chapter. One of them is mostly related, again, to one of the discussion questions from the chapter. So if you paid attention in the discussions and were involved, you should be able to do that fine. I'm not going to tell you which one, but you should be okay. All right? Then there's another one about the effectiveness of treatment versus punishment. Okay? Treatment versus punishment. So it asks you to take a position on something related to that. Okay? So, structure, you guys are good? Understand? Okay. So, if you remember, we had for our chapters, we had one on stress and how it influences your life. We had a chapter on disorders, and then we had a chapter on therapy. Okay? So, the first section of multiple choice, I tried to make it a little bit more on the stress stuff since I have those two matching sections that are a little heavier on the other sections. But there are still a decent number of questions from each chapter. Okay? One of those questions, or one of the concepts that we address through a few of the questions include like your appraisal of a stressful situation. So that also brings to light an important distinction between like stress and a stressor, right? What's the difference between stress and a stressor?
Stress is what you feel, the stressor is what brings it on.
Stress is your reaction to some external
Stress is
stimulus.
the event.
Stressor is an event or a happening that causes you difficulties. Good. Okay? So you hear a loud noise, you hear something, and you're trying to figure out, does this affect me? Is it good or bad? What type of appraisal is that? Primary or secondary?
The primary.
Primary. Then after you determine if it's good, bad, or irrelevant, right? Then you decide what you're going to do. What type of appraisal is that?
Secondary then?
Secondary. Good. Okay. Let's see, some of these are concepts. Okay. Another concept we talked about quite a bit was the avoidance, approach, or double approach avoidance. That's how you handle evaluating whether you should decide to do or something based on your perceived level of stress, right? If you are trying to weigh out like two bad options, two options that you consider mostly bad, what would that be called? Avoidance. If you're trying to weigh out two different options that have elements that are a little bit of good and elements that are a little bit of bad, what would that be?
Approach avoidance. No.
Two different options.
Oh, double then?
Double approach avoidance, okay? If you're trying to decide if you should do something or not, and it's got good or bad elements, what is that?
Avoidance approach.
Yeah, approach avoidance. And then if you're trying to choose between two really good things, like, you know, two girls or two guys ask you out and they're both like, you know, funny, attractive, friendly, all that, you're like, well, I don't know, because they're both good, right? Okay? So make sure that you could read scenarios related to that and pick which type it is. There's like a few things that are assessed about that. Okay? In the text, we also talked about good stress and bad stress. Good stress is stress that motivates you, like the internal reaction. It motivates you to do things that are good, to cope with it in a positive way. Bad stress is the other way, you cope with it in an ineffective manner. What are the terminologies for that?
Isn't eustress good stress?
Eustress and what's the bad stress? Distress. Like if you're under distress, it's a bad thing, right? Like a distress signal. You're out at sea and a ship starts sinking, you send out a distress signal, that's bad. Okay? Alright. There's another thing that we talked about called the general adaptation syndrome. That's your biological response to a stressor. Okay? There's 3 different stages to that. What are those stages?
Alarm reaction, resistance stage, and exhaustion stage.
Alarm, resistance, exhaustion. Good. So if you think about that, that makes sense, right? What's going to happen first? You're going to get startled, there's going to be an alarm. Then you're going to resist against it, and after a while you're going to become exhausted if it continues, right?
That's when people freak out, like the exhaustion stage.
Well, it could be. I mean, it's not just necessarily freaking out, but it's like biologically if you're exposed to a large enough stressor,
yeah.
Like you're a zebra in the middle of Africa and you're trying to run away from a lion, like eventually you're going to die, right? You were supposed to for one of the discussions.
No, that's okay.
Right? Okay. All right. What's the difference between type A and type B personality?
Isn't type A introvert, type B extrovert?
No, not necessarily.
Yes, sir.
Although I'd say generally
Well,
type
type
A
A
is
is
going to be more of an extrovert.
Active. And type B, like...
Yeah, so type A is more on the perfectionist side. Okay.
Yeah.
If you remember that, that'll help you to understand it. Okay. So they're impatient, want things done right away. They can be friendly. They could be not friendly, but ultimately they want to get things done. Right. They're very focused on getting stuff done. So I have a few students in particular that I think of as being a little bit type A, like wanting things a certain way. If stuff doesn't go well, they're concerned about things, right? So that's kind of type A. Okay? All right. Let's say that you're diagnosed with OCD. What does OCD stand for?
Obsessive compulsive.
Obsessive compulsive disorder. Good. So let's say that it's about like germs, right? So I am obsessed. I'm concerned about the germs. How am I going to manifest that obsession? Like, what am I going to do? Wash my hands a lot. Use hand sanitizer. Not shake people's hands, right? So, what in that instance would be the obsession?
Clean. Be clean.
Cleanliness. Thinking about the disorders. What's the compulsion? Washing your hands. Okay? Alright, what's the key characteristic of dissociative disorders?
You think you're multiple people?
No, that's DID.
Oh.
What about the other two types? Fugue and amnesia.
Memory loss.
Yep, memory loss or losing your identity. Yep, those are the key things with dissociative disorders. So, with dissociative amnesia, what's the difference between that and dissociative fugue?
One of them lasts longer.
No.
Few you forget stuff.
No, both of them you forget stuff.
Oh.
The way I remember this is, in fugue you flee, okay? F and F, right? So you like you'll get on a train, you're like, I gotta get out of here. And then when you get to somewhere, you forget stuff. Might be like everything about your life. It might be like the last 3 days or whatever. If you're on a Greyhound bus, you don't remember. It might be the last couple months, but you just forget stuff, okay? All right. What's the goal in humanistic theory? Like the top of the pyramid, like we talked about today.
Self-actualization.
Self-actualization. Okay? So, what does that mean, though? Like, that's the goal, but what does that mean?
Basically know who you are.
Okay, you know who you are, and you're trying to reach your maximum potential, right? That's the thing with self-actualized. Somebody that's self-actualized has formed a solid identity, knows what they want, and are striving to achieve that actively. Okay? Alright, let's say that, and this happened to me, this is water actually, not pop, I just filled it up from earlier today. But one of my vices physically is I drink way too much caffeine, right? So now, if I want to drink caffeine to make me stay awake, I have to drink like half of a pot of coffee, probably, right? I can't just have this much. This wouldn't affect me at all. So what is that called? The biological need that I have to get. I don't have a need for caffeine biologically, but if I want to get the result, I need more of it, right? What's that called? I've developed a what for it?
Tolerance.
A tolerance. Okay, good. So if I don't have caffeine and then I have a headache, what are those physiological symptoms called?
Withdrawal.
Withdrawal. Good. So all drugs have that. Like you can develop a tolerance and you can experience withdrawal. They differ in terms of type of the drug, right? Okay. All right. What is the difference between fear and anxiety?
Anxiety is general, fear is specific.
Yep. Fear is specific. Like I'm afraid of clowns, or somebody in period 6 today said that they were afraid of elephants. Like I asked somebody in class, on a scale of 1 to 10, how afraid are you of mice? And they're like 7, but elephants would be like a 36 for me, I think is the number they use, right? So that'd be fear. If they're sitting here and they're like worried that bad stuff's going to happen to them, that's anxiety. Make sense? Okay? All right. Real physical symptoms that are caused by stress or tension, what are those known as? Marissa? Okay, it's a little bit more than that actually, but that's the root word. It's what's the term?
That's that.
Okay. It's psychosomatic. Psychosomatic. What's the name of the Bible for psychological disorders?
DSM.
Okay, what edition are we on of that?
4.
4, so they're writing the 5th now, obviously. Okay? Alright, let's see. What 2 disorders are generally considered the most severe by most psychologists?
Schizophrenia.
Okay, schizophrenia is one, and what's the other one? DID, dissociative identity disorder. Okay? This obviously varies, right? If you're somebody that has OCD and you are like, you gotta live in a bubble, you can't touch people at all, you can't go out of your house because you're so consumed by the obsession with getting sick. Compare that to somebody that has schizophrenia but is treating it and still is able to function. Obviously, in that instance, the OCD isn't as big of a deal, right? Not saying that it's not or I should say the OCD is a bigger deal, right? The schizophrenia, in that instance, is not as big of a deal. I'm not saying it's not bad, I'm just saying there are instances where you could have somebody that has a different disorder from schizophrenia that's worse for them, okay? But generally speaking, schizophrenia, DID, okay? What's the difference between a delusion and a hallucination?
Is a delusion something you think and a hallucination something you see?
No, not necessarily. That could be correct, but you need to expand it a little bit more.
Delusions, false beliefs that a person maintains.
Okay, so a delusion's a false belief you have, and a hallucination is?
Perceptions that have no direct texture.
Okay, a false perception. Yep. So a delusion would be like, let's say I think, I don't know, who's a famous actress now? I don't know. Who's a famous actress that all the guys here are like, she's attractive?
Megan Fox.
Okay, Megan Fox, right? So it doesn't take him any time at all. He's like, oh, I know, right? So if I walk into the classroom and I'm like, guess what? I'm going to call Megan Fox and she's going to go out with me. It's going to be awesome, right? And I really believe that. Okay, that's a delusion. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he's like, no, that's me, right? I'm going to call her up, okay? That's a delusion, right? If I literally see Megan Fox walk into the room, I'm like, Megan Fox is here, right? And she's not really here. What's that? A hallucination, okay? Or I hear voices that tell me you should call her up. Like, ooh, that's hallucination. So you understand the difference of those? You could identify it in a scenario? Okay. Another thing we talked about is something called the SRRS scale. That has to do with stress. I had you guys look at it in class a little bit. What does that show us?
What?
What does that
in the book?
It was in the book.
Yeah.
Yep. What does that show us? Has to do with stress.
Levels of, like an event, and then like the level of stress that it goes with it.
Yeah, so an event somebody could have happen to them or be involved with, and then how stressful the average person perceives that event. Okay, do you guys remember this? There's a ranking in the text.
Yeah.
Okay, so what was the most stressful thing for the average person?
Death of a spouse.
Death of a spouse. Okay, death of a spouse. And what value was that given? 100, yeah, it's almost like IQ, except for nothing gets above 100, right? So 100 is the worst, the bigger it gets, the worse it is. So most of the stuff on top had to do with what?
Death.
No, not necessarily.
Like your spouse being not with you.
Right, so some type of relationship difficulties, either because of death or because of divorce, right? Okay. What are the names for categories of mental disorders that are described in the DSM?
Axes.
Yeah, axes, or like the plural of axis, okay? Okay, let's say that Nicole has problems, like in social settings, she gets really anxious, and I'm like, here, tell you what, I've got this pill right here, that if you take it, it's going to help you do better in social situations, okay? And I'm like, here you go. And I give her this pill, and she takes the pill, and then when she takes the pill, she goes out and starts talking to people and feels fine, okay? In reality, this is a supplement called glucosamine chondroitin. It's supposed to help with joint pain, right? So nothing has ever been researched for this that proves that this helps with anxiety.
That's
I give it to her.
placebo effect.
Yep. She takes it. What's that called?
Placebo
The
effect.
placebo effect. Okay. So that's where like a medicine or a treatment helps you, but it's not really the drug. It's just your belief in it. Okay. What model do we use in diagnosing and treating disorders? Do we use a sociological model, a spiritual model, a medical model, or a moral model?
Moral, maybe.
Medical.
A medical model, yep. Disorders, illness, right? Mental health, okay? All right, so you guys had to wait a little bit for me to get to the review session because we had that little kid match in between. And let's say really that's the only time you have to wait for me. What would that be called if it's like you get delayed a little bit and you're not really in a big hurry? And it's a relatively minor day-to-day stressor, not a big deal really. Starts with a H.
Hassles.
It's a hassle. Good. So when does a hassle become like distress?
Well, that happens all the time.
If it happens all the time, or if it gets worse, right?
The Mrs. Metcalf thing. The thing on her stapler on her desk.
Right. Yeah. So when I was in Metcalf's room, I used to take her stapler and just turn it, just like 5 degrees, just a little bit. Okay. I'd honestly go around and try to clean her room up and straighten the desks out, but every day. Well, not every day, but a lot of times I just turned the stapler just a little bit, just to see if she noticed it. I'm sure she did, but okay. All right. I mentioned to you how for a while, and sometimes I still do this, I like lay in bed and then I'm like, did I lock the door? And then I go check. And I go back in bed and I'm like, maybe the screen door's open. Maybe I didn't have that locked. And it's like February and there's an 8-foot drift in front of our porch, right? So chances are nobody's going to get in there, right? What's that called? If I'm constantly thinking about it.
Obsession.
Obsession, and then me checking the doors.
Compulsion.
Compulsion. Okay. Let's see. Which type of therapy is generally the most effective?
Behavioral.
No.
Biological.
No. It's kind of a trick question.
All of the above.
Yeah. The guy in the clip we saw today said.
Oh, all of them.
Yeah, the eclectic approach. So you figure out what the person needs and use like all of them. The other thing is, if the approach is taken seriously and followed through with, even if like I treat you with just behavioral and treat you with just cognitive and treat you with just biological, if you follow the treatment, they found that they've all been effective as long as you believe in it and you do what I say, right? Okay? All right, I'm going to go to the ID section and just kind of give you some examples from that where it's like anxiety, somatoform, or in the words of Marissa, somatomoform. Dissociative, or the way I mispronounce it a lot, disassociative. Mood disorders, schizophrenia, personality disorders, or all the above. Okay? So here we go. Here's an option. You tell me which one it is. Depression. You only have 6 options. Anxiety, somatoform, dissociative, mood, schizophrenia, personality, or all the above. Mood. Okay, good. Depression's a mood disorder. Okay. Which category is the most rare type? I mean, think about it. Which one do you hear about the least?
Schizophrenia, maybe?
No.
Definitely not mood, so...
Right. Definitely not anxiety.
Oh, dissociative?
Dissociative. Good. Okay. Hypochondria is an example of what type? Think about this. Like, don't worry about analyzing this too much. Just think about the symptoms, and you can put it in the category, right? So, in hypochondria, what is that?
First off, what's somatoform?
Okay. Somatoform is where you have a disorder where there's physical symptoms with no apparent physical cause. Okay?
Okay.
So knowing that, what category would hypochondria be? That's where you're concerned about being sick and you're like, oh, I have a backache or whatever. But they check you out and they're like, oh, we think everything's fine. So what category would that be?
Somatoform.
Somatoform. Good. Okay. All right. PTSD. Anxiety. Okay. Amnesia. Dissociative. Okay. Blank identity disorder. Dissociative. Okay. Antisocial disorder. Personality. Okay. Hallucinations. That's a symptom now. Which disorder does that? Which category does?
Somatoform?
No. Which video clip did we have that had the kid that had hallucinations? What disorder is that?
Schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia. Okay. Bipolar disorder. Mood disorder. Good. Okay. Narcissism. Or narcissistic. Personality. Good. Okay. Alright, you get the idea. You get the idea. So if you just know what the disorders is, think what are the symptoms and you should be able to put them in the categories, okay? Alright, same thing. Therapy. Here's your options. Psychoanalytical, humanistic, cognitive, behavioral, biological, or all the above. Okay? Developed by Freud.
Psychoanalytical.
Developed by Maslow and Rogers.
Humanistic.
Developed by B.F. Skinner.
Behavioral.
Behavioral. Good. Most commonly used approach in the U.S. today.
Biological.
Biological. Okay.
What were the second set of names that you said?
Maslow and Rogers.
What was that one?
Humanistic. Okay. Let's see. Psychosurgery. Which perspective would you use that?
Psychoanalytical.
Biological.
Biological. Yep.
Ugh, that picture's gross.
You don't like it?
Couldn't look at it.
I just spelled surgery.
This approach believes that incorrect beliefs are the cause of maladaptive behavior.
Cognitive.
Cognitive, right? Uses principles of conditioning to shape.
Behavioral.
Yep. Anytime you see the word conditioning, you should think behavioral. Okay? Tries to correct false assumptions, like in rational emotive therapy. An
Cognitive.
assumption is a method of thinking, right? It's a belief, so yep. Okay, that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm not going to go over that whole section because you'll get the idea. Okay? So that section's going to go pretty quick, right? That from like 40 to 65 or whatever, like you'll get through those real fast. Okay?
The treatment in therapy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's just you see a statement and then you have to match what category is it. Psychoanalytical, humanistic, cognitive, behavioral, or biological. Or there's all of the above option too. Okay?
What are the options for the disorders?
Disorders is just the categories of disorders we talked about.
Yeah.
So somatoform, dissociative, schizophrenia, mood disorders, personality disorders, anxiety, or all the above. Okay, so to give you a type, it would say it could give you a symptom, or it could give you a like pattern, whatever, and you have to identify what it is. So it could say hallucinations, and then that's most commonly associated with schizophrenia, right? It could say amnesia or forgetting stuff, and that's dissociative. It could say like phobias. Okay, phobias are related to phobic disorders, which is a type of what kind of disorder? Anxiety, yeah, because they're nervous or anxious around stuff. Good. Okay. All right, that's it. Questions?
Are we gonna have to know, like, Axis 5 has to do with adapting or whatever?
No, you don't have to. That axis stuff, no. You just have to be aware that they're divided into axes and maybe a little bit about what the purpose of that is. So it's kind of, if you've been paying attention, that question's fairly common sense. Okay? Anything?
I have a question, but I can ask it after we
Okay.
record it.
I'll ask after.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So we'll stop now so they can ask questions, right?